Mexico has always had dangerous men. The country's drug war has produced dozens of cartel leaders over the decades, men who built empires, corrupted governments, and ordered mass killings without hesitation. Some of them became famous. Some of them became legends. Most of them, eventually, either got arrested or got killed. But there is a difference between a cartel leader who is feared by civilians and one who is feared by other cartels. The first kind is common. The second kind is almost unheard of. For most of the drug war's history, the major cartels operated within a set of understood boundaries. They fought over territory, yes. They killed each other, yes. But there were limits, geographic, strategic, and sometimes even personal, that kept the worst of it from spiraling completely out of control. Most cartel bosses understood that attacking the military directly, or sending hitmen into the capital city, or publicly executing dozens of rivals in broad daylight would bring down a response they could not survive. El Mencho did not care about any of that. He attacked the military. He sent gunmen into Mexico City. He shot down a helicopter. And he kept running one of the most powerful criminal organizations on Earth for 15 years before anyone could stop him. Today, we are covering why every cartel in Mexico feared Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, the man known as El Mencho. A boy from the dirt Nemesio, Ruben Oseguera. Cervantes was born on July 17, 1966, in Aguililla, a small rough town buried deep in the mountains of Michoacan. The area is part of what locals call Tierra Caliente, the hot land, a stretch of western Mexico where marijuana plantations and small drug trafficking networks have been woven into the local economy for generations. His family was poor. He dropped out of school in the 6th grade. He grew avocados, worked in fields, and had no education beyond primary school. As a teenager, he crossed into the United States illegally, eventually settling in California near San Francisco and Sacramento. It was there, learning how drugs moved across borders, that his instincts sharpened into something far more dangerous than street-level dealing. In 1994, he was convicted in California for conspiracy to distribute heroin, and he served 3 years in a U.S. federal prison. When he was deported back to Mexico, he did not come back empty-handed. He came back with contacts, experience, and a deep understanding of how the American drug market worked from the supply side up. Back in Mexico, he did something that surprised everyone who later learned about it. He briefly served as a municipal police officer in Tomatlan, Jalisco. That time in law enforcement gave him something most cartel leaders never had: an insider understanding of how police operations were planned, how raids were coordinated, and how intelligence was gathered. He knew which routes they watched. He knew how they communicated. He knew their playbook because for a short time he helped run it. He eventually left law enforcement and joined the Milenio Cartel, where he worked his way up as a key enforcer. He later spent time working within the orbit of the Sinaloa cartel structure. By the time anyone realized how dangerous he was, he had already positioned himself perfectly. When the Milenio Cartel collapsed in 2009, after its leader, Oscar Nava Valencia, was captured, El Mencho did not fall with it. He saw the chaos as an opportunity, and he co-founded the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known as CJNG. Knowing who he was as a person only explains so much, though. What made every cartel in Mexico genuinely afraid of him was not his backstory. It was what he built with it, and exactly how he chose to announce himself to the world. The day they found 35 bodies. In September 2011, a group calling itself Los Mata Zetas, widely believed to be connected to the rising CJNG, dumped 35 bodies beneath an underpass near a shopping mall in Boca del Rio, Veracruz. In broad daylight, 2 trucks left the bodies in a pile where civilians walking to work would find them. A message at the scene made clear what the group intended. They had come to Veracruz to clean it out. The 35 bodies were people they claimed were members of Los Zetas. This was not random violence. It was a deliberate public announcement sent to every criminal group operating in Mexico. The CJNG was not asking for a seat at the table. They were flipping the table over entirely. What made it so shocking was the target. Los Zetas were considered the most militarily capable cartel in Mexico at the time. They had been founded by deserters from Mexico's elite special forces unit, the GAFE, trained soldiers with military-grade weapons, operating with military discipline. For a rival group to dump 35 of their bodies on a public road, in a city they claimed to control, sent one clear message to everyone watching: this new organization was not afraid of anyone. Within 30 days of that introduction, security forces recovered the bodies of around 30 more apparent victims the same group had killed in the same region. In less than a year, the CJNG had expanded its operational reach across Mexico at a speed that had taken older, established cartels many years to achieve. Other cartels at the time operated within certain unspoken rules. There were agreements, truces, and boundaries that kept violence somewhat contained. El Mencho did not recognize those boundaries. He built a cartel whose entire identity was based on speed, aggression, and a willingness to attack rivals, police, military, and politicians without hesitation or warning. That attitude worked. By 2012, the CJNG was already considered one of the criminal groups with the greatest operating capacity in all of Mexico. Then, in 2015, the cartel did something that left no doubt about what El Mencho was willing to do, or who he was willing to kill. But before the helicopter, there was something else that year that made security analysts stop and stare. The army that shouldn't exist. In 2015, a video began circulating that stunned law enforcement on both sides of the border. It showed hundreds of armed CJNG members standing in formation alongside a convoy of armored trucks, all filmed in military style. The men were uniformed, the vehicles were reinforced, the weapons were heavy caliber. It looked, visually, like a standing army, not a street gang. Not a cartel in the traditional sense, but an organized paramilitary force operating inside Mexico. Security analysts and DEA officials who saw it said the same thing. This was something different. Most cartels operated through cells and networks, keeping things fragmented for security reasons. El Mencho had built something that could mass its forces, move them together, and fight openly. He wanted everyone, rivals, government, civilians, to see exactly what he had. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The video was propaganda, yes, but it was also a direct message. Every cartel boss in Mexico who watched it had to make a calculation about whether challenging the CJNG was worth the risk. Most decided it was not. What happened on May 1st, 2015, just weeks later, confirmed why that was the right decision. Shooting down a military helicopter. On April 6th, 2015, CJNG gunmen blocked a road in San Sebastian del Oeste, Jalisco, set a vehicle on fire, and ambushed a convoy of Jalisco State Police officers. 15 officers were killed. One of the deadliest single attacks on Mexican law enforcement in modern history. 3 weeks later, on May 1st, 2015, the Mexican government launched Operation Jalisco, a large-scale military campaign with one primary goal: capture El Mencho. Intelligence reports said he was hiding near the municipality of Villa Purificacion in southern Jalisco. Soldiers and federal police moved into the area. Military helicopters provided air support from above. The CJNG was waiting for them. An armed convoy of cartel vehicles had moved through dirt roads before dawn, headlights off to avoid detection from the air. When the military helicopters flew over, the cartel opened fire with heavy weapons. One of the helicopters, carrying 18 passengers, was struck by heavy weapons fire and went down. It spun in the air, trying to stabilize, then fell. The crash scattered wreckage up to 250 meters in every direction. 9 soldiers and law enforcement officers died. A survivor later recounted that 70% of his body was covered in third-degree burns and that he underwent 15 reconstructive surgeries. It was the first time a Mexican cartel had successfully shot down a military helicopter. While the military scrambled to respond, the CJNG simultaneously launched coordinated attacks across 25 municipalities in Jalisco and 4 surrounding states. They set buses, banks, and gas stations on fire. They blocked roads across the Guadalajara area to slow military movement and protect El Mencho's escape route. The assault spread across an enormous portion of western Mexico within hours, all to give one man time to disappear. El Mencho escaped. Every cartel in Mexico had watched the Mexican military operate for years. They had seen other cartel leaders get captured or killed in operations. What El Mencho demonstrated that day was that his organization was willing and capable of fighting the Mexican military directly and walk away. For rival cartel bosses watching from a distance, what mattered most was not the helicopter itself. It was the fact that he had prepared for that operation in advance, with that level of weaponry and coordination, and that none of it had leaked before the attack began. That kind of internal discipline was as frightening as the violence itself. What came 5 years later proved it was not a one-time act. It was standard procedure. On the morning of June 26, 2020, Omar Garcia Harfuch, Mexico City's Secretary of Public Security, was traveling through the Lomas de Chapultepec neighborhood, one of the most prestigious and monitored areas in the capital. Ambassadors live there, wealthy business leaders. It is as far from cartel territory as a street in Mexico City gets. A public works truck and a white SUV suddenly blocked his armored vehicle at an intersection. 28 gunmen appeared. They carried 50 caliber rifles, weapons designed to destroy armored vehicles, and fragmentation grenades. They fired for several minutes into his SUV. 2 of his bodyguards died. A 26-year-old woman driving nearby to sell street food with her family was also killed in the crossfire. Garcia Harfuch was shot 3 times, in the arm, the shoulder, and the knee, but survived. From his hospital bed, he publicly blamed CJNG. This was not a skirmish in a rural drug war zone. This was a coordinated military-style assassination attempt in the heart of Mexico's capital, in a wealthy neighborhood full of security cameras and government protection in broad daylight. Mexican intelligence had actually intercepted communications between June 8th and June 12th of that year, in which CJNG members discussed targeting one of 4 senior government officials. They chose Garcia Harfuch. 12 suspects were arrested at the scene. Security analysts described the attack as exceptional. One told reporters that nobody had dared to confront Mexico City police at this scale before. The message El Mencho sent was the same one he had been sending since 2011. No location was off limits, and no amount of security would protect you if CJNG decided you were a target. For rival cartels watching all of this, the lesson was even starker than it was for the government. If El Mencho was willing to send 28 gunmen with 50 caliber rifles into the most fortified neighborhood in Mexico City to kill a senior official, what would he do to a cartel leader who challenged his territory? That question, left unanswered and hanging in the air, is what kept most rivals from making a direct move against CJNG. But the violence was only one part of what made him so feared. The business operation underneath it was just as formidable in its own way. building an empire that ran on fentanyl. U.S. authorities estimated that CJNG controlled a massive share of the drugs entering the U.S., making it one of the primary suppliers feeding American markets. That is not a small player carving out a niche. That is a dominant force reshaping an entire industry. The cartel controlled the port of Manzanillo in Colima, one of Mexico's most important Pacific ports. That control allowed them to import chemical precursors from suppliers in China, which they used to manufacture methamphetamine and fentanyl inside Mexico. Authorities believe the cartel operated dozens of large-scale methamphetamine laboratories across Mexico. Analysts estimated the cartel's drug trafficking network generated billions of dollars annually, with the fentanyl pipeline alone making CJNG one of the primary drivers of the overdose crisis that was killing tens of thousands of Americans every year. U.S. officials repeatedly labeled CJNG one of the most dangerous transnational criminal organizations in the world. In 2025, the Trump administration formally designated it alongside 7 other cartels, opening the door for expanded U.S. military involvement in targeting their networks. What made the business structure so effective and so hard to dismantle was how El Mencho built it. The CJNG operated on a franchise model. Smaller, local criminal groups across Mexico could affiliate with the cartel, operate under the CJNG name, and access its supply chains, protection, and infrastructure. In exchange, they paid fees and followed orders. The DEA described the structure as resembling a franchise business. The cartel was believed to consist of dozens of affiliated criminal groups operating under its umbrella across Mexico and internationally. CJNG operated across most of Mexico's states and maintained international trafficking routes spanning the Americas, Europe, Africa, Australia, and Southeast Asia. Every major cartel in Mexico, the Sinaloa Cartel, Los Zetas remnants, the Gulf Cartel, La Familia Michoacana, found themselves in direct conflict with CJNG at various points because El Mencho's expansion had no natural stopping point. He fought everyone, everywhere, at the same time. CJNG has been responsible for a large share of Mexico's cartel violence in recent years, and by 2020, Mexico's former security commissioner was calling the cartel the most urgent threat to the country's national security. The ghost nobody could find. Despite all of it, the helicopter, the assassination attempts, the billions in drug revenue, the bounties on his head, almost nobody knew what El Mencho looked like. For years, only a handful of verified photographs of him existed in the public domain. He gave no interviews. He made no public appearances. He did not post on social media or send video messages. While the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known as CJNG, produced narco propaganda with his name attached, El Mencho himself remained invisible. The U.S. Department of State offered $15 million for information leading to his arrest, one of the largest bounties ever placed on an individual in the drug war. Mexican authorities offered 30 million pesos on top of that. Despite the money, the manhunts, and intelligence operations involving the DEA, the CIA, and Mexican Special Forces, he evaded capture for over 15 years. His son, El Menchito, was arrested in 2014, extradited to the United States in 2020, convicted at trial in September 2024, and sentenced to life in prison in March 2025. His wife was arrested in 2018. Multiple brothers-in-law who ran the cartel's financial arm were arrested and extradited between 2015 and 2025. The people closest to him were systematically taken off the board. He kept going. The same instincts that had made him a capable enforcer, caution, patience, the ability to read a situation before acting, turned him into a ghost that two governments spent over a decade trying to find. It all ended on February 22nd, 2026, in Tapalpa, a mountainous town in Jalisco. Mexican special forces, working with intelligence support from the United States, located him by tracking a romantic partner. In the early hours of the morning, an operational force moved in on the property where he was hiding. A firefight broke out between the Jalisco New Generation Cartel gunmen and Mexican special forces. El Mencho was wounded during the confrontation and later died while being transported for medical treatment. He was 59 years old. The reaction was immediate. CJNG members launched retaliatory attacks across more than 20 Mexican states within hours. Vehicles were burned to block roads across Jalisco and neighboring states. Businesses were set on fire. International flights out of Guadalajara were suspended. Civilians received shelter-in-place advisories. The scale and speed of that backlash, carried out within hours of his death, across most of the country simultaneously, was itself a final demonstration of the infrastructure he had spent 15 years building. No other cartel leader in recent Mexican history had inspired that kind of coordinated nationwide response when they died. The boy who dropped out of school in 6th grade, grew avocados in Michoacán, crossed illegally into the United States as a teenager, served federal prison time for heroin trafficking, came back to Mexico and briefly wore a police badge, and then built a criminal network that two governments classified as one of the most dangerous in the world, had finally been stopped. But what he built did not stop with him. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.